Think of that. Nothing more repugnant to government than what Hobbes wrote in his, that Aristotle wrote in his Politics. Naturally, all thinkers, to some degree, have read Aristotle through their own lenses. Aquinas read Aristotle as a defender of monarchy. And Dante, in his book De Monarchia, on monarchy, saw Aristotle as giving credence to the idea of a universal monarchy under the leadership of a Christian prince. But Hobbes saw Aristotle quite differently. For Hobbes, Aristotle taught the dangerous doctrine of republican government that was seen to be practiced particularly during the Cromwellian period in England, during the Civil War. Aristotle's doctrine that man is a political animal, Hobbes believed, could only result, and did result, in fact, in regicide, the murder of kings. And there are certainly echoes of this reading of Aristotle as a teacher of participatory republican government in the later writings of democratic thinkers from Tocqueville to Hannah Arendt. Anyway, this returns us to the enigma of Aristotle. Who was this strange and elusive man whose writings seem to have been enlisted both for the support of monarchy and for republics, even for a universal monarchy and a smaller participatory democratic kind of government? Who was this man and how to understand his writings? Well, the best place to start is, of course, with his views stated in the opening pages of the Politics on the naturalness of the city. His claim that man is by nature the political animal, right? That's his famous claim. What does that mean? We are the political animal. Aristotle states his reasons succinctly, maybe too succinctly, on the third page of the Politics, where he remarks that every city or every polis exists by nature. And he goes on to infer from this that man is what he calls the zoon politikon, the political animal, the polis animal. And his reasoning here, brief as it is worth following. Let me just quote him. That man, he says, is much more a political animal than any kind of bee or herd animal is clear. Why is it clear? For we assert, he says, nature does nothing in vain, and man alone among the animals has speech. While other species, he notes, may have voice, may have sounds, and be able to distinguish pleasure and pain, speech, logos is his word for it. Man has logos, reason, or speech, the word can mean either, is more than the ability simply to distinguish pleasure and pain. He goes on, but logos, he writes, serves to reveal the advantageous and the harmful, and hence, he writes, the just and the unjust. For it is peculiar to man as compared to other animals that he alone has a perception of good and bad, just and unjust, and other things. In other words, he seems to be saying that it is speech or reason, logos, that is able to both distinguish and create certain moral categories, certain important moral categories that we live by, the advantageous, the harmful, the just and unjust, in things of this sort that constitute, as he says, a family and a polis. But that's Aristotle. In what sense, we could ask ourselves, and I think you probably will be asking in your sections, in what sense is the city by nature? And in what sense are we political animals by nature? Aristotle appears to give two different accounts in the opening pages of the book that you might pay attention to. In the literal opening, he gives what looks like a kind of natural history of the polis. He seems there to be a kind of anthropologist, writing a natural history. The polis is natural in the sense that it has grown out of smaller and lesser forms of human association. First comes the family, then an association of families in a tribe, then a further association in a village, and then you might say an association of villages that create a polis or a city. The polis is natural in the sense that it is an outgrowth, the most developed form of human association, in the way that one used to see in natural history museums, these kind of biological, charts of human development from, these, lesser forms of life all the way up to, civilization in some way. But there is, and that is part of Aristotle's argument, but there is a second sense for him, and in some ways a more important sense, in which he says the polis is by nature, it is natural. The city is natural in that it allows human beings to achieve and perfect what he calls their telos, that is to say, their end, their purpose. We are political animals, he says, because participation in the life of the city is necessary for the achievement of human excellence, for the achievement of our well-being. A person who is without a city, he says, who is apolis, without a city, must either be a beast or a god, that is to say, below humanity or above it. Our political nature is our essential characteristic, because only by participating in political life do we achieve, can we acquire the excellences or the virtues, as he says, that make us what we are, that fulfill our telos, or fulfill our perfection. So when Aristotle says that man is a political animal by nature, he is doing more than simply asserting just a truism or just some platitude. I mean, in many ways, he is advancing a philosophic postulate of great scope and power, although the full development of the thesis is only left deeply embedded. He doesn't fully develop it in this work or in saying this. In saying that man is political by nature, note that he is not saying, although he is sometimes taken to be saying this, that he is not saying that there is some kind of biologically implanted desire or impulse that we have or share that leads us to engage in political life. That is to say, we do not, he wants to say, engage in politics. To say it's natural for us to do so is not to say we engage in political life spontaneously and avidly, as you might say spiders spin webs or ants build ant hills. He is not a kind of sociobiologist of politics, although he sometimes appears this way when he says that man is the political animal. In some ways, to the contrary, he says man is political because, not because we have some biological impulse or instinct that drives us to participate in politics, but he says because we are possessed of the power of speech. It is speech that makes us political. Speech or reason, in many ways, far from determining our behavior in some kind of, again, in some kind of deterministic biological sense, speech or reason gives us a kind of freedom, latitude, an area of discretion in our behavior not available to other species. It is a reason or speech, not instinct, that makes us political. But then the question is for Aristotle, or the question he poses for us, is what is the connection between logos, the capacity for speech or rationality, and politics? How are these two combined? Why does one lead to or entail the other? And in many ways, he's not making a causal claim so much. He's not saying that it is because we are rational creatures possessed of the power of speech that causes us to engage in politics. He's saying more, he has more of an argument of the kind that that this attribute of logos actually entails political life. Logos, he makes this argument, I think, because logos entails two fundamentally human attributes. The power to know, first the power to know, you could say. The power to know is our ability to recognize by sight members of the same polis or city. It is above all speech that, in a way, ties us to others of our kind, that we share not just the capacity for language, in the way a linguist might assert, but that we share a certain common moral language. And it is this sharing of certain common conceptions of what the just and unjust that make a city. And it is the capacity to know and to recognize others who share this language with us that is the first sense in which logos entails politics. But reason entails, or logos entails more than this capacity. It also entails for Aristotle, interestingly, the power of love. We love those with whom we are most intimately related and who are most immediately present and visible to us. In many ways, Aristotle believes our social and political nature is not the result of calculation, as we will see in Hobbes, Locke, and other social contract theorists, but such things as love, affection, friendship, and sympathy are the grounds of political life and are rooted in our logos. It is speech, or it is speech that allows a sharing in these qualities that make